There was always a shadow in my smile, though I didn't know why back then. Maybe it began the first time I saw her, the woman who would unknowingly change the direction of my life. I was just a boy then, 14 and restless, growing up in a place where dreams were as rare as televisions. We didn't have much. My father worked at the mill on the edge of town, my mother took in sewing for the neighbors, and we lived in a little wooden house that always smelled faintly of soap and cornmeal. Evenings were quiet. Too quiet. The only sound came from a small radio sitting on top of our kitchen counter, humming old love songs through the static. But a few houses down lived Mrs. Zella. She was the kind of woman everyone knew, widowed, loud, and proud to be the first in the neighborhood to own a television. Every night after supper, she'd open her front door and people would start to wander in. Housewives, children, the old men with their straw hats. It was our version of a theater. My mother went often. Sometimes I went with her, pretending I was just tagging along, when in truth, I couldn't stand the silence of our house. I liked the warmth of those crowded nights, the smell of coffee and floor wax, the sound of women whispering about the story on the screen. And that's where it happened. One night, standing outside by the open window, my elbows resting on the sill, I saw her. A woman I'd never seen before. She was sitting on the couch beside my mother, and for a moment I forgot all about the flickering screen. She wasn't young, not like the girls at school. She must have been in her 30s, maybe older. But to me, she looked like something out of a dream. Elegant, graceful, with dark eyes that seemed to carry stories too heavy for words. I remember every detail. The way she laughed softly at something my mother said. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Even the way she crossed her legs with quiet confidence. I was just a boy looking through a window, but something inside me stirred, something I didn't yet understand. When the show went to commercial, I heard her voice for the first time. She mentioned something about Charleston, saying she was only visiting for a few weeks. My ears sharpened instantly. Charleston. A city I'd only ever heard about in the songs on the radio. To me, it sounded like another world. I didn't know then that her name was Isabel. I didn't know she'd leave the kind of mark that years and years couldn't erase. All I knew, standing there in the yellow light spilling from that window, was that I wanted to see her again. At some point, she noticed me. Her eyes drifted toward the window, curious, and she asked, "Who's that boy out there?" Mrs. Zella laughed. "That's Nathan, Durla's son. He watches every night, rain or shine. If I forget to open the window, he might die of heartbreak." They all laughed, even my mother. My face burned, and I thought about running away. But then, Isabel smiled at me, a soft, almost secret smile, and in that moment, everything changed. I felt something shift inside me, like a door had opened where I didn't know one existed. From that night on, I was there every evening, always by the same window, always waiting for her. Sometimes she'd glance over and catch me staring. She'd smile, just a little, before turning back to the screen. And every time she did, my heart would stumble, as if it didn't know how to beat properly anymore. A few days later, she did something that left me breathless. She looked toward the window and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Come in, sweetheart. You don't have to stand out there. There's room on the couch." My mother started to say something, but Isabel was already waving me inside. My feet felt heavy as I crossed the doorway, and when I sat down beside her, the air seemed to thicken. She smelled of something floral and sweet, something that didn't belong in our small town. My palms were sweating. My throat was dry. The television might as well have disappeared. She passed me a bowl of popcorn halfway through the show. Our fingers brushed, just once. It was nothing, just a touch, but it burned in my memory for years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her face, hearing her voice, smelling that perfume. I didn't understand what I was feeling, only that it made everything else, school, chores, the radio, seem smaller, duller. Looking back now, I realized that was the night I stopped being a child. I didn't know it then, but I'd crossed an invisible line, one that divided the innocent from the awakened. I often wonder if she knew what she was doing to me, if she noticed the way I blushed every time she looked my way. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But one thing is certain, that night by the window was the beginning of everything. It was the night I first learned that love doesn't always wait for the right time, or the right age, or the right circumstance. Sometimes it just arrives, unexpected, undeniable, and far too soon. And once it does, you can never look at the world the same way again. I don't remember what show was playing that night. I only remember her perfume, sweet, faint, and floral, the kind of scent that lingers in the air long after the person has left. Even now, decades later, if I walk by a woman wearing something similar, my heart falters for a moment. It's strange how memory hides in things you can't see. The evening after she invited me inside, I arrived earlier than usual. I told myself I was just helping my mother carry a bowl of popcorn, but the truth was, I wanted to see Isabel again. The air was warm, filled with the smell of rain on dirt roads. When we stepped into Mrs. Zella's living room, the room was already half full. People chatted, fans squeaked, and the television glowed in the corner, humming the opening theme of the nightly soap. And there she was, sitting in the same spot as before, her legs crossed neatly, her hand resting lightly on her chin. Isabel. Her hair shone in the yellow light, and her laughter mingled with my mother's. When her eyes met mine, she smiled. That smile could have ended wars. "Come sit, Nathan," she said, patting the cushion beside her. I hesitated. My mother nudged me gently, half amused. "Go on, boy, she won't bite." Everyone laughed, and I felt my face flush, but I went anyway. When I sat down, the couch sank slightly, and for the first time, I could feel her presence up close. Her warmth, the faint movement of her breathing, and that smell. God, that smell. Her perfume was unlike anything I'd ever known. My mother smelled of starch and lavender soap. Isabel smelled like a story. Something expensive, secret, impossible to describe. A scent that promised you'd never forget her, no matter how hard you tried. The show played on, and people laughed at the characters' mistakes, but I couldn't focus on a single word. Every few seconds, she'd shift her legs or tuck her hair behind her ear, and my world would tilt again. I tried not to stare, but it was useless. My heart was learning a new rhythm, one that beat faster whenever she moved. At one point, she leaned closer to whisper something to my mother, and her arm brushed mine. My skin tingled. I felt like every nerve in my body woke up at once. She didn't notice, or maybe she did and pretended not to. Either way, I was lost. Halfway through the episode, Isabel stood up and went to the kitchen. I followed her with my eyes until she disappeared behind the door. Then came the sound of popping. Pop, pop, pop. And the smell of butter filled the room. She returned with a big metal bowl of popcorn and, smiling, offered it first to me. "Here, sweetheart," she said softly. I took a handful, my fingers trembling. Our hands brushed again. Electricity. That's the only word I can use. Electricity that reached somewhere deep, awakening something that had been asleep all my life. After the show ended, people started leaving, but my mother and I stayed a little longer. She and Mrs. Zella kept chatting about the story, about groceries, about nothing. Isabel sat quietly, staring at the fading light through the curtains. Then, for a second, she turned to me and said, almost like she was talking to herself, "You remind me of someone I used to know." I wanted to ask who, but my voice got trapped in my throat. I only managed a nervous smile. She smiled back, tenderly, then looked away. That night, lying in my bed, I replayed every second. The smell of her perfume, the softness of her voice, the warmth of her body beside mine. I didn't even understand what love was, but I knew that whatever this feeling was, it had already taken root. I didn't choose it. It just happened. In the days that followed, I looked for her everywhere, at the grocery store, on the street, near Mrs. Zella's house. And every time I saw her, something inside me lifted. I was no longer just a boy from a poor neighborhood. I was someone who had been seen, noticed, smiled at by her. Sometimes when she laughed, she'd tilt her head back slightly, and the sunlight would touch her hair like gold. I used to think maybe angels looked like that. But the part that stayed with me most wasn't her beauty. It was her scent. That delicate perfume that clung to her scarf, her dress, her hands. I began to crave it, like air. I'd breathe it in when she passed by and hold it, afraid it might slip away too soon. One evening, I asked my mother if she knew what perfume Isabel used. She looked at me suspicious. "Why do you want to know?" "I just like how it smells," I said, my voice breaking. She smiled knowingly, but didn't answer. Mothers always know more than they say. Weeks later, I realized I wasn't sleeping as easily as before. My dreams were full of her laughter, her eyes, the sound of her bracelets when she moved. It was both sweet and unbearable. I was 14 and already haunted by a woman twice my age. And yet, even now looking back, I wouldn't trade that feeling for anything. Because that was the first time I understood beauty. Not the kind you see, but the kind you feel. The kind that sneaks into your chest, soft as perfume, and stays there forever. The next morning, the air felt different, lighter, expectant, as if the world itself was holding its breath for something to happen. I remember leaving the house early, pretending I had errands to run, but truthfully, I was just wandering, hoping for a glimpse of her. It had been 3 days since that night on the couch beside Isabel, 3 days since I'd heard her laugh up close, breathed in that perfume, or felt the quiet electricity of her presence. My mother was hanging laundry when she mentioned that Mrs. Zella's sister, Isabel, would be leaving soon, heading back to Charleston. "Just a short visit," she said. "She's got her own life up there." The words hit me like a stone to the chest. She was leaving, and I hadn't even told her goodbye. I spent the whole morning in a daze, dragging my feet through the dusty roads of our neighborhood. Everything looked smaller. The trees, the houses, even the sky. It's strange how the world can shrink the moment someone threatens to disappear from it. Later that afternoon, I was on my way to meet my friends at the old soccer field when I heard it, a voice, soft but unmistakable. "Hey, psst, sweetheart, come here a minute." I froze. It came from the direction of Mrs. Zella's gate. I turned, and there she was, Isabel, standing behind the old white fence, her eyes hidden behind sunglasses, a silk scarf tied loosely around her hair. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When I walked closer, she smiled. That same slow, effortless smile that had burned itself into my memory. "Can you do me a favor?" she asked. Her voice was warm, melodic. "Could you run down to the store and get me a pack of cigarettes?" I nodded before she even finished the sentence. "Of course." She gave me a couple of bills, her fingers brushing against mine. "You're an angel," she said. I ran. I don't think I've ever run that fast in my life, not even during soccer practice. When I came back, out of breath and with the cigarettes in hand, she was waiting by the same gate, the sun touching her shoulders like a halo. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, taking the pack. "Keep the change." Then she tilted her head slightly, her expression playful. "Remind me again, what's your name?" "Nathan," I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. She smiled, repeating it slowly, like she was tasting it. "Nathan. That's a lovely name." And then she looked at me in a way that made my stomach twist. You've grown since the last time I saw you. You're almost a man now." I laughed nervously, not knowing what to say. She leaned closer, her perfume wrapping around me like a soft fog. "Do you have a girlfriend?" The question made my throat tighten. "No, ma'am." She chuckled, a low, teasing sound. "No? I find that hard to believe. A sweet boy like you must have someone at school who can't stop looking at you." My cheeks burned. "No one," I said quickly, staring down at the ground. She laughed again, the sound like velvet brushing against my skin. "Well then, the girls around here don't know what they're missing." She reached out and touched my face, gently, with the back of her hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like time stopped. Her fingers were cool, soft, smelling faintly of the same perfume that haunted my dreams. "Such a handsome boy," she whispered, almost to herself. "You'll break hearts one day." For a moment, the world disappeared. The street, the heat, the noise of kids playing down the road. It was just her and me, frozen between what was and what would never be. Then, as if sensing my unease, she smiled again and took a small step back. "You're coming tonight, aren't you, to watch the show?" "I think so," I stammered, "if my mom goes." "Good," she said softly. "Then I'll see you there." She turned, pushing the gate open, but before walking inside, she looked back one last time. "You really are a sweet boy, Nathan." And then she winked. "See you tonight, cutie." That word, cutie, followed me all the way home. It echoed in my head during dinner while my mother talked about laundry and grocery prices. I barely ate. My thoughts were all tangled up in the memory of her touch. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. That night, my mother decided not to go to Mrs. Zella's house, said she was tired, said she'd rather stay home. I begged her to change her mind, but she laughed it off. "It's just a show, Nathan. You'll live." So, I didn't go. I spent the night staring out the window, listening to the crickets, imagining Isabel sitting on that couch, waiting, maybe wondering why I wasn't there. The next morning, I learned she'd left at sunrise, gone back to Charleston. No goodbye, no last look, nothing. For days, I walked by Mrs. Zella's house hoping she'd return. The curtains were drawn, the porch empty. It felt like waking from a dream you don't want to end. I didn't know it yet, but that short exchange by the gate would follow me for years. Every detail, her smile, her perfume, the faint scrape of her voice when she said my name, stayed lodged somewhere deep inside me. It was the first real heartbreak of my life, and it came wrapped in a smile. "5 years can change a lot. The way you talk, the way you see the world, even the way you breathe. But some memories don't fade. They stay exactly as they were, preserved in amber somewhere deep in your chest. For me, Isabel was that memory. Even when I thought I'd forgotten her, even when new faces and fleeting crushes crossed my path, she lingered in the back of my mind, like a ghost who refused to leave. I was 19, maybe 20, working at a small repair shop on the edge of town. Life had settled into its quiet rhythm: work, dinner, sleep, repeat. My mother still lived in the same house, and Mrs. Zella's place, the one with the television and the open door, hadn't changed either. The same peeling paint, the same creaky steps, the same lace curtains fluttering in the window. But behind them, something had shifted. It was 2 days before Christmas. The town had that soft buzz that comes before the holidays. The smell of cinnamon, laughter spilling from porches, kids running around with cheap tinsel and candy canes. I was walking home from work, my hands in my pockets, when I saw her. At first, my mind refused to believe it. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe it was the light, maybe it was wishful thinking. But as I got closer, I knew. I knew. She was standing right there in front of Mrs. Zella's gate, wearing a long beige coat and that same calm, impossible smile. The years had passed, yes, but time had been kind to her. Her hair was shorter, her eyes softer, but she was still Isabel, still the woman who'd haunted my teenage years. For a moment, I froze. I didn't know if I should call her name, if she'd even remember me. My heart was beating so loud I thought she could hear it from where she stood. Then she looked up, and our eyes met. Recognition flickered in her gaze, faint at first, then widening into something real. She tilted her head slightly, as if to make sure she wasn't mistaken. "Wait," she said, smiling. "Aren't you that boy who used to watch the shows here with your mother?" Her voice, the same gentle rhythm, the same warmth, sent a shiver down my spine. "Yes," I managed to say, smiling awkwardly. "It's me, Nathan." "Nathan," she repeated, tasting the name again, like an old song she hadn't heard in years. "Oh my, look at you. You've grown." I laughed nervously. "It's been a while." 5 years, she said softly. "Can you believe that?" 5 years, a whole lifetime, and yet it felt like only yesterday she'd called me sweetheart by the gate. We stood there, both smiling, both pretending that the world around us wasn't trembling quietly. "I can't believe you still live here," she said. "I came by to see my sister. She's not home yet, but I thought I'd take a walk. And then I saw you." "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. "Still here, still the same town." She nodded. "And I came back alone this time." Something in her tone softened, a shade of sadness behind the brightness of her words. "My husband passed 3 years ago," she said. "And my daughter's engaged now. She's grown, busy. Life moves fast, doesn't it?" I didn't know what to say. All I could think about was the way the wind caught a strand of her hair, the way she smiled despite the ache in her eyes. "Sorry," I murmured. She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled again. "Don't be. Life gives, life takes. What matters is what we remember." We talked for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. About work, about the town, about everything and nothing. There was an ease between us that surprised me. The same connection that had once lived in silence now found its voice. At one point, she asked, "Have you ever been to Charleston?" I shook my head. "Never. Haven't had much time for traveling." She smiled, a spark lighting in her eyes. "Then you've never seen the ocean?" "No," I said, almost embarrassed. "Only in pictures." Her expression softened. "Oh, Nathan, you have to see it someday. Promise me you will. It's beautiful. It reminds you how small we really are, and how big love can be." I smiled faintly. "Maybe one day." She stepped closer, close enough for me to smell her perfume again, that same delicate scent I'd carried with me for half a decade. "Then maybe," she said gently, "when you come to Charleston, I'll be the one to show it to you." The words hung between us, fragile and dangerous. We didn't speak for a moment. I just watched her, the curve of her lips, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the woman I had once loved in silence, now standing in front of me, alive and real. When she finally said goodbye, she touched my arm lightly, almost reverently. "It was good to see you again, Nathan," she said. And I, lost in a haze of memory and wonder, could only whisper, "You too, Isabel." As she walked away down the sidewalk, the world felt different again, like it had opened a door I didn't know was still there. That night, as the Christmas lights flickered outside my window, I lay awake, thinking of her voice, her smile, and the ocean she promised to show me. I didn't know it then, but the story we'd left unfinished was about to begin again. That Christmas felt warmer than any I could remember, though the air outside was cool and sharp. The whole town shimmered with small lights, the kind that make even the simplest houses look like something out of a dream. And yet, none of it mattered. The only thing glowing for me that season was her, Isabel. After our encounter by the gate, she had stopped by my house one afternoon to see my mother. I hadn't expected it. I was fixing a loose board on the porch when her voice drifted from the gate, soft and familiar, calling out, "Merry Christmas, Durla." I nearly dropped the hammer. When I turned around and saw her standing there, holding a small basket wrapped in ribbon, the world seemed to pause. She had come to deliver some sweets she'd made. Pecan candies, she said. But when her eyes found mine, there was a spark, quiet but unmistakable. My mother invited her in, of course, and soon the two of them were reminiscing about old times, laughing the way only women who've shared decades of hardship can. I sat there, pretending to listen, while my heartbeat thundered in my chest. After a while, Isabel turned to me. "You're quiet, Nathan," she said, smiling. "Still shy after all these years?" I smiled back, trying not to seem nervous. "Maybe just a little." My mother laughed. "He's been like that since he was a boy. Some things never change." Isabel's eyes softened. "Some things do," she said quietly, looking at me as though she saw all the years that had passed between us, the child I had been and the man I had become. Before leaving, she leaned in and whispered, "I'll be at the square tonight for the Christmas Eve lighting. Come, if you can." And then she left, the scent of her perfume lingering in the room long after the door closed. I spent the rest of the day restless, pacing, pretending to help my mother prepare supper, while my mind replayed every word, every look. When the evening came, I said I was going out to see the lights. She nodded, smiling knowingly. The town square was alive with music and laughter. Children ran in circles with sparklers. Couples stood hand in hand beneath the large oak tree strung with glowing bulbs. I stood there for a while, scanning the crowd, until I saw her. Isabel was standing near the fountain, wearing a dark red coat and a knitted scarf. The glow of the Christmas lights brushed her face, turning her hair to gold. When she saw me, she smiled, the kind of smile that feels like forgiveness. "You came," she said softly. "I said I would," I replied. We walked together around the square, our words awkward at first, then warmer as the night unfolded. We talked about simple things, her daughter's engagement, my work, the way small towns never seem to change. But under every sentence, there was something else, an invisible current pulling us closer, something unspoken that had been waiting for years. When the choir began to sing Silent Night, the noise around us dimmed. She stopped walking, her eyes reflecting the lights above us. "This song always makes me cry," she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the traces of all the winters she had lived through, the joy, the loss, the quiet strength. Without thinking, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers were warm, soft, trembling slightly in mine. We stood there in silence, listening to the music, both of us pretending it was just friendship, just nostalgia. But the air between us was thick with something neither of us could deny. After the ceremony ended, the crowd began to fade. We stayed. The square grew quieter, the lights dimmer, until it was just the two of us under that wide December sky. "Do you remember the first time we met?" she asked suddenly, a faint smile touching her lips. "How could I forget?" I said. "You were sitting by the window at your sister's house. I couldn't stop staring." She laughed softly. "You were such a shy little thing back then." "I was terrified," I admitted. "You were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen." Her laughter faded, replaced by a long, searching silence. "You still say things that make a woman's heart stop, Nathan." She took a step closer. The scent of her perfume mingled with the cold air. "It's strange," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I came back here to visit my sister, but it feels like I came back for something else, or someone." Before I could answer, she reached up and touched my face, the same way she had years ago when I was just a boy. Only this time, the gesture felt different, familiar but heavier, charged with everything that had gone unsaid between us. "Isabel," I breathed. "Don't say anything," she whispered. "Just don't." And then she kissed me. It wasn't like the kisses in the movies or the ones I'd imagined all those years ago. It was tender, trembling, full of all the time we'd lost and all the longing we'd hidden. It felt like a memory being rewritten. The boy at the window finally stepping inside the story. When we pulled apart, she smiled, her forehead resting against mine. "Merry Christmas, Nathan." "Merry Christmas," I whispered back. That night, as I walked her home beneath the blinking lights, the world felt both infinite and small. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be exactly where you were meant to be, even if just for one moment in time. It was the best Christmas of my life, and the beginning of something I could no longer stop. After that Christmas night, the world looked different. The streets seemed brighter, the mornings softer. Even the air tasted new. I woke up every day with her name echoing in my mind like a hymn I couldn't stop humming. Isabel. The woman who had once been just a memory was now part of my every breath. But love, I soon learned, doesn't always unfold the way you dream it. A few days after the holidays, she returned to Charleston. There were tears in her eyes when we said goodbye at the bus station. I stood there clutching her gloved hand, pretending not to see the sadness hidden behind her smile. "I'll write to you," she promised. "Every week. You'll get tired of hearing from me." "As if I ever could," I said. She laughed softly, and then she was gone, the sound of the bus engine swallowing the rest of her words. I remember walking home through the cold air, my hands empty, my heart full of something too heavy to name. The next morning, I went back to work, pretending everything was normal. But every time the mailman passed, I found myself looking up, waiting. And then, a week later, it came. A white envelope with my name written in elegant handwriting. The ink curved gently, the letters dancing across the page like her voice in my ear. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding my breath as I opened it. "Dear Nathan," it began. "I hope you don't mind me writing so soon. The city feels strange without your smile. Charleston is beautiful this time of year, but beauty means little when the heart is elsewhere." I read those lines again and again until the paper grew soft beneath my fingers. Every word she wrote carried her warmth, her humor, her gentleness, her longing. And so it began. Week after week, her letters came. Some short, some long, all filled with small pieces of her world. The scent of the ocean breeze, the laughter of her daughter preparing for her wedding, the loneliness of nights spent thinking about me. I wrote back every time, pouring my heart into each page. I told her about the shop, about my parents, about the quiet ache that lived in me since she'd left. I tried to sound mature, like a man who could match the depth of her words. But sometimes, my letters still sounded like that boy who had once watched her from a window. She never seemed to mind. In one of her letters, she wrote, "You know, Nathan, sometimes I sit by the window and imagine you standing there, the same way you used to, with that curious, innocent look. I wonder if you realize how much that boy changed my life, how much his silence spoke to me." When I read those words, I knew there was no turning back. Whatever this was, love, destiny, or madness, it had taken hold of both of us. Months passed. The letters became longer, more intimate. She wrote of her dreams, her fears, the way she would sometimes reach across the bed at night, expecting someone to be there. I told her how I counted the days until I could see her again, how the nights felt endless without her. One afternoon, I came home to find a small package waiting on the porch. Inside was a pressed seashell and a note, "So you can have a piece of the ocean before you see it." I held that shell like a sacred thing. Its faint salt smell carried her to me, and for the first time, I felt what love at a distance truly meant, both a gift and a wound. People in town began to notice my distraction. My mother asked who I was always writing to. I just smiled and said, "A friend." But inside, I knew she was much more than that. Sometimes when I reread her letters late at night, I could almost hear her voice, low and melodic, reading them aloud. I'd close my eyes and imagine her beside me, her head on my shoulder, her laughter drifting softly in the dark. Then one evening, her letter ended differently. "I think it's time, Nathan. You've never seen the ocean, and I promise to show it to you. I want you to come to Charleston. Please say yes." And I must have read that line 100 times. My hands trembled. The thought of seeing her again, not as a boy, not as a memory, but as a man, was almost too much to take in. I wrote back that same night, my heart racing. "Yes, I'll come. I don't know when, but I'll find a way." It took another month before I could arrange the trip, saving what little I earned, asking for days off at the shop, and trying to calm the storm inside me. The night before I left, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that window from years ago, the one where I'd first seen her. I realized that back then, I was on the outside looking in. Now, for the first time, I was about to step through the door. As the bus pulled out the next morning, I pressed my forehead against the glass, watching the town fade behind me. My heart was pounding with a mix of fear and joy. I was going to see her again. I was going to see the ocean, and I knew, deep down, that neither would ever look the same after that. The road to Charleston felt endless. The bus moved through rolling fields and sleepy towns, past rivers that shimmered like veins of silver in the morning light. But my mind was miles ahead, already there, already with her. Every turn of the wheel brought me closer to the woman who had lived in my memory for half a decade. I hadn't slept much on the way. I just sat by the window, watching the world blur, replaying her letters in my head. Each line she'd written had become a kind of map, guiding me not just toward her, but toward the person I was becoming. By the time we reached the city, I no longer felt like that boy who once stood outside her window. I was different now, older, steadier, and yet somehow just as nervous as I'd been that first night. When the bus finally pulled into the Charleston station, my heart felt like it was trying to break free from my chest. I scanned the crowd through the fogged glass, and then I saw her, Isabel. She was standing by one of the benches, holding a small umbrella, wearing a cream-colored coat. The sight of her was enough to make the world fade away. She smiled when she saw me, that same timeless smile, and suddenly all those years of distance collapsed into nothing. "Nathan," she said softly when I stepped off the bus. Her voice was like sunlight on cold skin. I didn't even realize I was smiling until I felt my face ache. She reached out, brushed her fingers against my cheek, and for a brief second, I thought I might cry. "You made it," she said. "Of course I did," I whispered. "You said you'd show me the ocean." She laughed, the same low, tender laugh I'd once dreamed of. And just like that, the world felt right again. Charleston was everything I'd imagined and more. The air smelled like salt and magnolia. The streets were lined with cobblestones and old trees that bent as if whispering secrets. Isabel led me through it all, the narrow alleys, the harbor, the little cafe by the water where she ordered us 2 cups of coffee and watched me with quiet amusement as I tried to take it all in. "You're staring," she teased. "I'm just trying to remember everything," I said, "so I don't ever forget it." She smiled, resting her chin on her hand. "Some moments don't need remembering. They never leave you." We spent the day walking, talking, laughing, rediscovering. She told me about her daughter's wedding plans, her late husband, the house she'd made a home on her own. I told her about work, about my mother, about the way her letters had kept me alive in that little town. She listened quietly, her eyes soft with something deeper than affection. By late afternoon, She took my hand and said, "Come, it's time." For what? For me to keep my promise. We drove for almost 2 hours along the coast, the air growing cooler, the scent of the sea drifting in through the open windows. When she finally stopped the car, the sound hit me first, the roar of waves, steady and eternal. We walked over the dunes, and then I saw it, the ocean, endless, alive, breathing. For a long moment I couldn't move. The sight of it was too much, too beautiful, too vast. The sunlight shimmered across the water like broken glass, and the wind carried the taste of salt and freedom. "Go on," Isabel whispered. "Touch it." I stepped forward slowly, my shoes sinking into the cool sand. When the waves reached my feet, I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't known I was waiting for. "I told you it was beautiful," she said softly, coming up beside me. "It's more than that," I replied. "It's infinite." She smiled. Exactly. We stood there in silence, the ocean stretching endlessly before us. For a while, we didn't need words. The world spoke for us, in the rhythm of the waves, in the wind brushing against her hair, in the quiet space between us that felt sacred. Then, without thinking, I turned to her. She looked at me, that same look from years ago, the one that made my heart stutter. Only now, it was deeper. She wasn't just the woman who had awakened my boyhood wonder. She was the woman I loved, fully and without hesitation. She reached out, took my hand, and whispered, "I'm glad you came." "I'd have crossed the world if you'd asked," I said. She laughed, her eyes glistening with tears she didn't try to hide. "You always did say the right thing." That night, after the drive back, she showed me the small guest room she had prepared. "Get some rest," she said, lingering at the doorway. "Tomorrow, I'll show you more of the city." But I didn't sleep right away. I sat by the window, listening to the faint murmur of the waves in the distance. The room smelled faintly of her perfume. I thought about how strange life was, how it had taken me from the boy outside her window to the man inside her home. Outside, the tide kept rising and falling, like a heartbeat echoing in the dark. And somewhere inside me, I knew this was only the beginning of a love that would defy everything: time, distance, reason. The sea had promised something that day, and deep down, I believed it would keep that promise. I stayed in Charleston longer than I'd planned, a week that turned into 2, then a month, and soon the thought of leaving felt impossible. Life there felt softer, fuller, like stepping into the version of myself I'd always been meant to become. And Isabel, she was the heartbeat of it all. We spent our days like people who knew time was fragile. Mornings began with the smell of coffee and the sound of waves rolling in from the harbor. She'd hum quietly while watering the plants by the window, sunlight spilling across her face, and I'd think, this is what home must feel like. Sometimes we'd take long walks through the narrow streets lined with oak trees, their branches draped with silver moss that shimmered in the breeze. She'd tell me stories about her life, the cities she'd lived in, the people she'd loved and lost. I listened to every word, learning her like a language I wanted to speak fluently. But even in the quietest moments, there was a weight beneath the joy. The quiet awareness of how unlikely it all was. I was young, almost 20, still finding my place in the world. She was a woman who had already lived so many lives, but somehow our hearts had found a rhythm that ignored reason. One evening, after a long walk along the pier, she turned to me, her expression unreadable. "Nathan," she said softly, "have you thought about staying?" I froze. "Staying?" "Yes," she said. "Here. In Charleston. With me." The words hung between us, fragile as glass. My first instinct was disbelief, not because I didn't want to, but because it felt too much like a dream. But my work, my family, everything I've known. She smiled faintly, interrupting. All of that will still exist. You'll find work here. I'll help you. Life has a way of rearranging itself when you follow your heart. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. The way the lamplight softened her face, the steadiness in her eyes. She wasn't asking out of whim or loneliness. She was asking out of love. Out of the quiet certainty that what we'd found wasn't a passing moment. "Do you really want that?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing against my chest. "I don't just want it," she said. "I need it." And just like that, the decision was made. I didn't go back. The first few months were a blur of new beginnings. I found work at a mechanics shop by the docks, and in the evenings, we'd cook together, talk for hours, or simply sit in silence, content in the presence of each other. There was a peace in that simplicity, a quiet happiness that made the rest of the world seem distant. Sometimes, I'd catch her watching me from across the room, a half smile playing on her lips. When I asked what she was thinking, she'd say, "I was remembering the boy who used to watch me through a window." "And what about him?" I'd tease. Her eyes would soften. "He grew into the man I was always meant to meet." We built a life out of small things, shared mornings, laughter, the comfort of familiarity. What began as an impossible love became the foundation of something unshakable. Years passed gently, the way waves reshape the shore without you noticing. The world changed around us. New neighbors, new seasons, the slow drift of time, but we remained steady. Our love was quiet, yes, but it was the kind that endures storms. Sometimes, late at night, she'd rest her head on my chest and whisper, "Do you ever think about how strange it all was? How fate kept throwing us together?" "All the time," I'd say. "I think maybe we were meant to find each other, no matter how long it took." She'd smile, her voice barely audible. "Then promise me one thing, that you'll never regret the years we lost." "I don't," I'd tell her. "I only regret the years before I knew you." That always made her cry, just a little. We celebrated anniversaries without counting, birthdays without fear of aging. Time didn't frighten us anymore. It had already given us what we wanted most, each other. And though the world never quite understood us, a woman 20 years older than the man she loved, we stopped caring long ago. Because love, real love, doesn't measure itself in years. It measures itself in mornings shared, in hands held, in the way two souls learn to breathe in unison. 27 years passed like that. 27 years of quiet joy, of growing together, of learning that love isn't about fireworks, it's about constancy. It's about waking up every day and choosing the same person again and again. When I look back now, I realize that what began as a fleeting fascination became the very fabric of my life. Isabel wasn't just the woman I loved. She was the mirror in which I found myself. We had no grand house, no wealth, no fame, but we had peace. We had laughter. We had love that outlasted reason. That was our miracle, the life we built from a single look through a window. And though time would one day demand everything back, for those 27 years, the world belonged to us. I still wake up reaching for her. Even after 6 months, my hand moves on its own in the dark, searching for the warmth that isn't there anymore. The other side of the bed stays cold, untouched, as if time itself refuses to move on from the moment she left. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It sits quietly beside you while you make coffee, while you fold the sheets, while you pass by the armchair where she used to read. It hides in the smallest details, The mug she always used, the smell of her perfume still clinging faintly to the pillow. Every morning feels the same. I wake before the sun rises, out of habit. She used to love watching the first light break over the water, and even now, I find myself sitting by the same window, just as she did. The world outside keeps moving. The tide still rolls in, the birds still call. But everything inside me stands still. Some days, I imagine she's just in the kitchen, humming softly, waiting for me to join her. I can almost hear it. That tune she'd hum when she was lost in thought. The one she said reminded her of the first day the world made sense again. But when I walk into the kitchen, there's only silence. It's strange how love, when it's real, doesn't disappear with the body. It stays, in the air, in the walls, in every echo that refuses to fade. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I swear I feel her hand brush against my cheek, just like she used to do when she thought I was asleep. 6 months ago, the house was full of light. Now it's quiet, but not empty. I talk to her sometimes, out loud, because pretending she's still here makes breathing easier. "Do you remember, Isabel?" I whisper. "How you used to laugh at me when I couldn't cook an egg without burning it?" The silence doesn't answer, but I can almost hear her laughter anyway. There are moments when grief turns gentle, like an old friend who sits beside you and says, "I know." Those are the moments that hurt the least. But then, there are the others. The nights when the ache comes roaring back, raw and merciless. Nights when I'd give anything to hear her voice again, to see her standing at the door, telling me to put the kettle on. People say time heals. They don't tell you that it also erases, slowly, cruelly. I'm terrified of forgetting her voice, her scent, the sound of her footsteps on the porch. So I cling to the memories with everything I have, repeating them in my mind like prayers. I remember her laugh, her favorite song, the way her hand always found mine during thunderstorms, the way she'd whisper my name in the dark like a promise. And I remember the day she left. It was quiet. Heartbreak never comes with warning. She was sitting by the window, her gaze lost somewhere beyond the horizon. I remember thinking she looked peaceful. When I touched her shoulder, she smiled faintly and said, "I'm just tired, love. Let me rest a little." Those were her last words to me. I didn't realize what they meant until hours later. I still see her there sometimes, in dreams, sitting in that same chair, sunlight on her face, looking at me with that gentle, knowing smile. And every time I wake, I lie there in the dark, half believing she's still beside me. I never remarried. People ask why, as if love has an expiration date, as if you can just replace a soul like hers. But the truth is, I don't want to fill the space she left. That empty side of the bed, it's sacred now. It's the place where her memory sleeps. Sometimes I visit the ocean we saw together for the first time. I walk along the sand until I reach the water's edge, and I whisper her name to the wind. The waves take it, carry it somewhere far beyond my reach. I like to think they bring it to her, wherever she is. Last week, I found an old box of letters tied with a faded ribbon, the ones we wrote when we were apart. I sat there for hours, reading them again, tracing her handwriting like it was a path back to her. In one of the last letters, she wrote, "If one of us goes first, promise to look for me not in the dark, but in the light, in the sunrise, in the sea, in everything that still breathes." I keep that letter by my bedside now. Every morning, when the sun rises and touches the empty pillow beside me, I close my eyes and whisper, "I see you, Isabel." Because maybe that's what love becomes in the end. Not something you hold, but something you feel everywhere. In the quiet, in the air, in the pulse of the world that keeps moving, even when your heart can't. And though her body is gone, her presence lingers like a promise. Gentle, unbreakable, eternal. She was the love that taught me how to live. And now, even in her absence, she's teaching me how to keep on living. It's strange how time moves differently after loss. The days still pass, but they no longer feel measured by clocks, only by the distance between one memory and the next. Each morning, I wake to the same quiet house, the same empty bed, and the same soft ache that has become both my wound and my comfort. And yet, somehow, she's still here. I feel her in the smallest things, in the creak of the floorboards, in the way the sunlight filters through the curtains just so, in the faint scent of gardenia that appears out of nowhere some afternoons. There are moments when I almost speak to her aloud, forgetting she's gone, only to stop and smile, realizing that maybe she isn't. They say love dies with the body. I don't believe that anymore. Love, real love, doesn't obey the rules of time or flesh. It seeps into everything, into air, into memory, into the pulse of the living. It changes shape, but it doesn't disappear. Isabel taught me that. She's still teaching me, even now. Some evenings, I sit by the window, the same one where she used to wait for me when I came home from work. The ocean hums softly in the distance, like a heartbeat that never fades. I imagine her beside me, the way she'd rest her hand on mine without needing to say a word. We used to talk about what came after life. She'd smile and say, "Maybe it's not a place, Nathan. Maybe it's a feeling, a continuation of love." Back then, I didn't understand. I do now. Because every time I think of her, she's not gone. She's here, in that continuation. In every breath I take, in every quiet morning, in every flash of memory that warms the dark. There's a tree outside our house, a magnolia she planted the year we moved in together. It's older now, bent by storms, but it still blooms every spring, white petals falling like snow across the porch. The first time it bloomed after she passed, I sat beneath it for hours, tears blurring the blossoms into light. And then, I swear, I heard her voice, soft, almost teasing. "See? I told you I'd never leave you." Maybe it was only the wind, or maybe it was her, keeping her promise, just as she always did. Sometimes, I think about the first day I saw her. Me, a boy of 14, hanging by a window, and her, the woman who unknowingly opened a door in my heart that would never close. I think about how impossible it all seemed, how wrong, how fated, how beautiful. It's been nearly 30 years since that night, and still, that moment glows inside me like a lantern in the dark. The truth is, I've spent my whole life learning what love really means. It's not about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about the quiet endurance of two souls who choose each other again and again, even when the world tells them not to. Isabel and I didn't have forever, but what we had was enough. Enough laughter to fill the silences, enough forgiveness to survive the storms, enough tenderness to make time itself jealous. Now, in these late years of my life, I find peace in the thought that love doesn't end. It simply changes its address. She's still somewhere close, watching, waiting, maybe in the reflection of the sea, maybe in the whisper of the wind through the magnolia branches. Every evening, when the sun sinks beyond the horizon, I whisper her name, not in grief anymore, but in gratitude. Thank you, Isabel, for teaching me that love can begin anywhere, in a small town, through a window, between a boy and a woman who never should have met, but somehow were always meant to. Thank you for every morning we shared, for every letter written, for every silence that spoke louder than words. And thank you for staying, even now, in the spaces between this world and the next. When my time comes, I don't want anyone to mourn. I just want them to know that I lived a full life, one built not on wealth or glory, but on love that outlasted reason, distance, and even death itself. Because love like ours doesn't die. It lingers, soft, invisible, eternal, in the hearts of those who were brave enough to feel it. Tonight, before I sleep, I'll open the window and let the ocean breeze fill the room. I'll close my eyes and imagine her standing there, smiling that same tender smile that once stopped my heart. And when I whisper her name, I know she'll hear it, carried by the wind, folded into the waves, reaching wherever her soul now rests. For love like ours is not buried. It endures. It outlives the years, the sorrow, and even time itself. And one day, when I close my eyes for the last time, I'll see her again, waiting, radiant by the sea she once promised to show me. And I'll finally say the words I never stopped meaning. I never left you, Isabel. I only followed where love led me. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to breathe it in and let it remind you that love, once awakened, never dies. Tell me in the comments, do you believe love can survive beyond time? Subscribe for more stories that speak to the soul, where memory, destiny, and love intertwine beyond the limits of life. Some people pass through our lives like wind through an open window, but others, they stay. In silence, in memory, in the beating of our hearts, they never truly leave.